she's out schmoozing with relatives, so I'll introduce her anyway. Welcome. Nice to see a good crowd here tonight. Make sure if you haven't already, we've got the goodies in the back. We've got regular coffee, decaf coffee, and Sweets' apple cider, and Carol's good home baked goodies. Okay. I'll make this brief so Mary can get right to her program. She brought, where does your camp dog? It's around.
Oh, don't tell me that.
Oh.
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
What goes on in the council chambers stays in the council chambers. Okay, Mary's passion for writing about forests and logging was inspired by her family's history. The Mortons owned Paris Manufacturing Company, and did you know that Ron Bancroft lives here? Didn't he buy that from your parents?
Planted a couple of steps.
Okay. Where they manufactured wooden sleds, skis, and other wood products. They operated a large lumber camp where her father lived as a young boy. This program also features historic photos, including several taken by her grandfather. Let's give a warm welcome to Mary.
Thank you. It's kind of fun for me. I get all excited about logging and forestry. And obviously I've written several books and a lot of articles in children's magazines about logging. And you know that logging is key to Maine history. I don't have to tell you that because the forest is immense. And the lumber industry is a critical part of our economy. It has been for a long time, and it will continue to be. So I'm going to share briefly my reason for writing about it, and then you have to go back with me a few hundred years for a few minutes so that we can tell that story. This is what started it all. My interest in all this was inspired by my family, and as she told you, our family owned Paris Manufacturing Company. This is my father at about age 6 with his first logging business. He had a Shetland pony, and he had this little logging sled, and he was told that as long as he didn't go into the deep woods, he could cut 4-foot logs wherever he could find them in the lumber camp. And I was so intrigued by all of this that I bugged him for years about all the information. He drew me diagrams of what the lumber camp was like, and I bugged my aunt too because she was 2 years older and she lived there, and I wanted to know everything. Where did they go? What did they eat? What did they wear? Who did they know? Every single thing. So this is my dad, and this is what started this crazy love of the woods. And you may remember the Paris Manufacturing Company in South Paris. And that's where the family made the products, but they cut the lumber in the lumber camp. And they were the first commercial maker of skis in the country. And they supplied skis to the Army during both World Wars. In fact, my brother still has a pair of the white skis and the white poles that they made specially for that. And they made sleds for Donald McMillan and Robert Peary to take to the North Pole. These are a few of the products that they made. You may recognize a few of them. And you may have even sat in one of these at some point. A lot of community buildings and churches, church parlors have those. Some still do. They weren't the most comfortable, but they were very convenient. These are my two favorites, my skis and my Speedway sled. And just so you know, I've been studying and reading and researching about logging for a little while. Can you tell? It's been a few years. Obviously, this is more than 20 years ago when I was writing my first logging history. And I had thought from my dad's stories that it was all fun and games, and I found out that this was not fun and games. It was a rough, dangerous existence. But my first book, Timber, came out in 2003, and it covers a lot of logging, and it actually, well, I was fortunate, it won a Lupin Honor Award from the Maine Library Association. And this, the mast pines, thank you. The mast pines, and you may know your mast history, but good old eastern white pine, the Pinus strobus, were the largest evergreens in the Northeast. And it just so happened that Great Britain, who owned us at the time, wanted them. And there was that takes place a whole lot of the book. But they needed ship's masts for their Royal Navy. And if they own you, they can get it. This pine right here is up at Ordway Grove in Norway. And that diameter is 44 inches on that tree right there. It's a pretty big tree. But when in 1634, when they were needing masts and sending them to England, what they did was they came along and they checked the height at this height of the tree, see that it was certain it had to be 24 inches or more in diameter right there. And then they marked it with a broad arrow mark right there so that it meant it belonged to the king. You can't have it, even if it's on your land, you can't have it because it belongs to the king. So that obviously caused a lot of conflict, and one of the reasons New England is, it was a real part of the war. You may have visited this place, the Tate House in Stroudwater. That was where Captain George Tate and his family lived, and he was the senior mast agent for the British Royal Navy. And so he oversaw the cutting and the shipping of the white pines from Maine to England. And it is a museum, you can visit it. But they only had very small, meager tools, little axes to cut these enormous trees. Now you understand that to cut this tree for a mast tree, for a mast pine, they had to cut these little ones to make a bed for it. So it would be a kind of a soft landing. And they had these just puny little saws, little axes that they were working with. And I just can't imagine how much time it would have taken, because most of those pines were 3 feet in diameter anyway. And some were defective, rotten inside when they got them down, and so they weren't any good, but maybe they used parts of them for smaller spars or yard arms or something, so they tried to use whatever they could. And these are the guys that did the pulling. For many, many years, they used oxen. They're slower than horses, but they're very strong. And so they used the oxen to do the pulling and getting them out of the woods. And then, of course, to get them out of the woods, they had to make a big, wide swing around in these towns and villages on the way to the shore. And if it's more than 100 feet long, it took up a lot of space. So they were swinging it. And this is one that's still there. This is over at Torrey Hill in the Buxton area. And there are several they call them town squares, and some of them are triangles because that's where the oxen went to pull the logs. And they had very fancy sawmills. You like this? I would not want to be the guy at the bottom. You'd get all cruddy. But anyway, the top sawyer pulled up and the man in the pit pulled down. And pit saws were used for quite a while. And you notice that there is a little wedge right there. That's to keep it from the saw blade from getting pinched. I suppose the one on the top was the boss and the one down below wasn't. I don't know. But then, of course, water power came into play. And by 1675, there were at least 50 of them. And somebody was saying they had some right here in Cumberland. They had about every town had a sawmill. And this water wheel is 9 feet in diameter. And guess how much horsepower it generated? 3 horsepower. 3 horsepower. I mean, and but even that was equal to the work of a lot of men. So it was a whole lot better. This picture I took in Bradley at Leonard's Mills. And if you haven't been there and have a chance to, it's a fun place to go. And then inside, this is at Leonard's Mills also, in their sawmill. And basically, it's a sash saw. It's an up and down saw. It's kind of like a motorized pit saw, really. And a lot of New England towns had them. And then when you go down below and you stand where all the cranking gears are going, really the floor shakes and everything else. It's very, very, it squeaks and shakes the floor. But men went into the woods for the winter, and they lived in really fancy quarters. This one was in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and if you notice, there are some pigs over here, and of course you see the cattle, and right in between there's what they called a dingle, and don't ask me why they called it a dingle, because I do not know how they came up with some of these names. But the building was divided into two parts, the bunkhouse and the eating area, and the kitchen and the dining hall, and the dingle was in between. And the only piece of so-called furniture that was in the dingle was a sharpening agent, because they all had to sharpen their own axes. But it was very fancy living, obviously. And these are the cook and the cookies surrounding him. And the cookies, they did, this was early 20th century here. This was one of my grandfather's camps. The lumber camp that our family had did not belong to the Paris Company. It belonged to International Paper Company. And the Paris Company bought stumpage, they called it, from IP. And so they agreed to haul pulp wood for IP, and they got the hardwood for their products. So it was kind of a convenient thing. But these little axes, finally they began to develop better axes. Like the one on the top, they made curved handles so they were easier to hold and handle. And then broad axes and double axes. And this axe, I couldn't pick it up. It's so heavy. It's a really, really huge, heavy broad axe. But that's how they hewed beams. And then, of course, they had to be sure they knew how much lumber they were getting. So they had different rules and by rules I mean measuring rules, to tell how much lumber it was in. And this spoked one here, these were every 6 inches, these spokes. And this caliper here they'd put around the tree to tell the diameter of the tree. And then you can't read it, but there's a whole bunch of numbers here that calculate how much lumber it is. So that the worker would have to walk along the log and count every 6 inches to count them. It was very high tech, I wanted you to know. And then the international rule down below it, they were numbers in 1 inch increments, and they could measure. But that's how they measured the footage, the board footage, they called it, one time with my sister. And we did a little tree like this, and it took, well, I don't know how long, but too long. But it's heavy work. But then, of course, once you cut it, you can't leave it there in the woods. You got to get it down to the shore or to where it's going. And that was done with horses, finally. And they twitched them, is what they called it. They twitched the logs one at a time from the cutting site to a yard, and then teams of horses would haul them to the landing. And really and truly, it was done in the winter, but at Leonard's Mills, they were demonstrating it in the summer, so that's when Carl took this picture, was up at Leonard's Mills. So then, the couple of horses, a team of horses would take several and go to a landing, usually by the shore, either out on the ice in the winter or close to the shore. And then comes the river drive in the spring. And this was, of all the dangerous jobs, this has to be the worst. A lot of men died on the river. First off, the work was numbing cold, and they were standing in the water a lot. And of course, they clogged the rivers every spring, and of course, they got jammed, and everything, anything that could go wrong did on a river drive. And this one man here is using a pick pole right there. The rest are using cant dogs. And in case you don't know what you know what a cant dog is, right? Everybody knows what a cant.
They also call it camp PV.
It's called a PV or a cant dog. This is a miniature one that was made by the blacksmith up at the lumber camp for my father when he was 6 years old. And if you gave this toy to a 6-year-old today, it would be terrible. I can't take this to schools when I go, so I bring it to Historical Society. But this was my dad's toy when he was 6. It really wasn't a toy. He was learning logging. But it's a cant dog, or a lot of people call him a PV. But now you know what it is. It's not a toy for a 6-year-old, really. It shouldn't be, but it was. And of course, the logs usually jammed in a river, the long logs, and very dangerous to break a jam. You get on it and somebody's going to go down, usually with it. And so they'd get into the bateaus, and then because the boat had long bow and stern, they could just run right out onto the logs and hopefully save it. But all logs could not be driven down rivers. Most, and a lot of them were, but when you have a company that wants to make sleds and skis and furniture and stuff like that, you need hardwood. And hardwood is too heavy to really float very well going down a river. So they do something different. And somebody said to an inventor in Waterville named Alvin Lombard, why don't you come up with a better way of, getting logs moved around so that we won't ruin so many horses in the woods. So Alvin Lombard invented the Lombard, and he built several of them in Waterville. And my grandfather, who was always liked every newest toy there ever was, got one for the Paris company. And actually, they named it, and the name is on there. I don't know whether you can read it or not, but the name Nina is right there. And why did they name her Nina? I haven't the slightest idea. We wonder whether it was maybe because he bought the 9th one that was made, because if the timing would be right. He bought it in 1911, and that could have been the 9th one, but because there's no one in our family named Nina. So I don't know why she's Nina, but you name your ships anything you want, right? So you name your log hauler whatever you want. So they could haul long loads of logs, and my grandfather used it for quite a few years, and then he got a gasoline-powered one later. And this is a diagram that the man who used to be at Leonard's Mills made. There had a 4-man crew, and you do not see the conductor in here because he didn't ride on it. He rode at the back of the train. This is the steersman right here, and he always got a lot of dust and ashes on him because he had no cover over him. And inside is the engineer, and he controlled the machine, except it had no brakes. So if you're going downhill and you need to go slower, the only thing to do is reverse. Yeah. And then there's the fireman who fed the slab wood into the boiler. And they did replace a lot of horses in the woods, and they could pull a lot more sleds than horses could. And this is the guy that got all dirty from all the dust in the air and the ashes and stuff. And that's the steersman on Nina. And this is what the engineer had to deal with. I don't know how he did all that stuff, but that's what the inside of it looked like. And he worked the throttle from there. But I can't imagine I can't think it would help an engine very much to be thrown into reverse if you're headed downhill, but that's what they had to do. And the conductor had this view because the conductor rode at the back, and he had a bell cord. If anything went wrong, he'd pull the bell cord, and then the guy would throw the engine into reverse to stop it. But they also needed good logging roads. They needed to have nice, icy logging roads. So the sprinkler sled, or the ice tanker, was used, and this was one of the coldest jobs of ever because they did it at night. And don't ask me why my grandfather took this picture in the day, but I guess he got them out to take a picture. Anyway, they could, that was filled with water, and there were little holes in the back, right where the runners of the sled came, and where they wanted to make ice, they unplugged the holes, and when they didn't want ice, like on a hill, they plugged the holes. That meant the workers had to get out off this thing and get down there and do that, and plug and unplug holes. Very crazy. But there's Nina going up into the woods with an empty sleds, a train of empty sleds, and she's going to go up and pick up all the work that the men have done up in the woods, and then they will. Nina will haul back a full load, leave that one to be filled, and then repeat the process every day all winter.
So did they have a big circle turnaround up at the top?
They had, everything had to be in a loop because it did go in reverse, but you can't with a train behind you. So yeah. And so this is the woods landing. And so you can see right here, see the sled? That was from the empty ones, and they're loading the sled. It's down at the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. And they'd load those up, and then the Nina would come by and take them away. And this was the crew, the Cant Dog men, that at the landing. It took all those men to pile up all those sleds. And they're holding their Cant Dogs, which you see they're bigger. They're a legitimate size. Mine is a little one. And so Nina's going back out now with a load of full load of logs, and left the empty one there for them to fill. And here's another shot of Nina trucking out of the woods. And these engines, they're like train engines. It's like 30 feet long. It's like as wide as this room is wide or so, and very large engines. And there's a long load of hardwood coming out for the company. That was the maple and oak and hickory and birch and ash and all that. And there's another one. These are all, my grandfather took all these pictures. And they could go uphill a slight grade, which horses couldn't do. Horses could never have done that. So, by going up, being able to go up a slight grade, you can change your watershed you're going into. So if you're hauling pulp for IP, and the logging camp was up in Coos County, New Hampshire, because my grandfather was told in South Paris, go up the Grand Trunk until you can find enough place for us to log for 10 years, log hardwood for 10 years. And he got all the way to Coos County and north of Berlin, and IP, that's where they got the stumpage. But IP wanted their pulpwood to go down the Connecticut River because their headquarters was in Glens Falls. So it was very near the Ammonoosuc, which fed into the Connecticut for the pulpwood, and then they put the hardwood on the train to come down to South Paris. A very complicated but fun kind of thing. And then, of course, I had to do primary research because, I had the first editor, had for several books, told me, primary research, Mary, primary research. Okay. But I got a chance to go down to Brunswick. Crooker was running their logger's wheel. It's on here, so I'm trying to bend it. It's not easy, but I got my primary research, and it was fun. So that was cool. Now, when they hauled all this all winter long, and they hauled all those logs, look at the pile of logs they got. And the sawmill would then open in the summer, and they'd run it all day long, all week long, all summer long, to get the logs, to get the lumber in, the logs into lumber. And that's the inside of the sawmill. This is the carriage that the men rode and that went back and forth here. This is where the saw is. And there's a big flywheel right there and another one down in the basement. And it was a big band sawmill, and it was, again, my grandfather liked the newest and best of all things, and the best was a bandsaw mill. So that, it was a huge improvement over the up and down sawmill. And they put a lot of lumber went out. They did about 25,000 board feet a day, cut all summer long. And then they did it for more than the 10 years that my grandfather was supposed to get it for. They had it, ran it for till from 1911 to 54. And so it was long. They were expensive mills, but they were worth it. And this is not Grandpa's mill, but this shows you what the bandsaw blade is. A double-bladed, and it's narrower than the crosscut saw, than the circular saw would have been. And so that just shows you what it was. And in the summer, here they are, and the sawmill's running. The logs would come in right there, go up into the mill, go along the saw and the resaw, and come out here, go onto the wagons for the horses, and then get taken over to the yard where they stored and dried the lumber. And here's the guy, the next summer, next year, he would load all the dried lumber up and take it to the sidecar at the Crystal, New Hampshire station of the Grand Trunk Railroad, and off it would go to South Paris. And here's another one of all the wood that was cut during the winter. It was really quite a huge operation. And they had their company office in the early 1900s, kind of looked almost the same when we went there, except that you notice when I went there in the 1950s and we had family reunions up there, there's a gasoline pump, because they then had a gasoline log hauler that Lombard also made. And so it was fun to go to the camp. And my father, who inspired all my writing, is the one kneeling, and he has a camera in his hand. My grandfather, the one who took all these pictures, is right there, and a whole lot of family members. But it was really kind of a fun place to go. And I think they would have run it longer than 1954, but one Sunday morning in 1954, there was a sawmill fire, and they decided not to rebuild. We got a call from my grandfather that right as soon as we got home from church, and everybody headed for Crystal, and that's what we saw. And you can see in that picture, and the lower picture, I hope you can see, there's part of the flywheel is right there. So that just all came apart. So they didn't rebuild.
How did the fire start?
They think someone was inside, someone in the middle of the night or whatever, smoking. But my grandfather loved the forest, and he won this award as the Outstanding Woodland Conservationist for Oxford County. What was that, 1961? And he really was. He loved it. But the fact that he could pick a site that he could log for 45 years was pretty good. So it was really nice. And of course, my grandfather and my father were both tree farmers. And we camped on the tree farm a lot up in Oxford County. So my love for the woods and fascination for it was all my family connection. But there was one troublesome thing that my father told me and my aunt told me when they were growing up there, and it was in the 1918 time. There was a world war going on, if you know your history. It was in Europe, but there were enemies in the woods of New Hampshire and Maine. And they knew the way that they recalled it was there were Huns in the woods, and it scared them. And so there was some trouble. So I had to do trouble. So that's why I wrote Trouble in Nathan's Woods. Nathan is not my father's name, but I made up that name. But at least I had some trouble to go on to make a story. Nathan learns that there's enemies and they intend to burn the camp, and he's going to save the camp and with one of his buddies. And in this camp, several families actually did live in the lumber camp. They had a school, a one-room schoolhouse there. They had to go to school. And you can, with historical fiction, which this is, and I have some here for sale if anybody wants them, you can make up a story, but you have to be true to the history. You can't change a lot, change that. And so I was glad that they had trouble because that gave me an excuse. But the crazy part is that you'd think after writing all this stuff and the fact that I'm not young anymore would make you think I'm done. And I know some of my family members have said, Mom, would you please be done with this? But I'm not done quite yet. And this book cover, all I have right now is the cover of it. It's due to be published in November. And it's an updated version of my 2003 book. And I thought, oh, this will be easy. I can just add some stuff. Well, that didn't work. But it still includes some of the early history, but it now adds the challenges of climate change and the advancements in equipment and methods, and it also discusses the future of our forest. And I've talked to a lot of foresters, Maine Forest Service people, and got a lot of help. And just as this again, like all of my books, is written for ages 10 and up. So if you're up, and I think everybody here is up. So it works. It would be good. But that book will be coming out in November. And it does deal with a few new things like mass timber, which we didn't have in 2003 when I was writing the other one. And it's great for construction. It's fire resistant and all that. And then that's going in. And what are the students at the University of Maine and Forestry School doing? They're using drones in their research, and that's exciting. And then you've probably all heard of the BioHome 3D, and that is using recycled forest products, waste products, sawdust, pitch, to make them, and it's a recyclable house, and it's good for the forest industry, and it will continue to be, and it'll help the affordable housing situation. So all those things are in my new book, plus the fact that there are some signs of climate change that we don't want to have to admit. And you've probably been by this sign in the last few days yourself over in North Yarmouth. So those things will be coming. And one of my Maine Forest Service people tells me, he said, we're living in a period of unprecedented change. And so my rewriting of timber was a little bit more difficult than I thought, because Morton was right. It is unprecedented change, and we'll have a lot of things to deal with. But that's what started it, was that crazy little picture. And so all of Dad's memories became my latest story and my next book. And that little mini two-sled, they call it, because it has two sets of runners, that is still with me. It's a magazine rack in my house. And that little cat dog I just showed you sits on that when it's at home. And through all of my talking lately about logging, recently I happened to meet a guy who had his 80th birthday last August 9, and we're big buddies now. So he's my new friend. And this is a thanks to everybody that helped me with it. And now, if you can put up with me a little bit longer, I would like to show you about a 4-minute video that my grandfather took. You understand, it's 110 years old. It's an old movie. But I would like to show it to you if I can figure out how to work this thing. I will do this, get rid of my laser pointer. They have a little bit of trouble in this movie too, just so you know. I gotta get out here so I can see it. They're filling the thing with slab wood. This is the steam log hauler. And that's a lot of heavy wood. And it was never a straight line. They always curved. Now they're coming down what they called Hay Hill. Hay Hill was, they had to put hay on it to slow it down. Now they're going up with an empty sleds. Like I say, it's 100 years old. The music didn't come with it. I don't know who added that. Now here Nina's coming in, and they will load all that wood that's been cut onto the sleds. And it was not easy. And if you've got your foot in the way or anything, it's just, And then the next summer, all of that would get cut up into lumber. They show this movie up at Leonard's Mills if you've been up there.
Is this a one-day load that you're talking about, or could be a week's load?
That's a one at a time. Every day they did this. Yeah. Now she's coming down again. And here's where we might have a little trouble. There she's coming down off Hay Hill again. There's, those are chains. They're chains. Yeah, big heavy chains. And pretty soon she's going to be hauling some softwood, some pulpwood. But all of this will get made into skis and sleds and furniture.
How many trips a day would one of those?
They could only do one, they did one trip a day, yeah. Yeah, it takes a while to load and unload. Now that's see that? You don't want to be, that's a gasoline, you don't want to be in the way. But it's really quite a remarkable film, really, to show the history. But now you notice these are not the right position. She went off, Nina went off, and they had a devil of a time with it. But now there's some pulpwood. That's the 4-foot logs, and that's the gasoline-powered log hauler. That's what they're hauling for IP right there.
And that would get floated, all that would get floated down.
The IP would get floated down the river, the 4-foot logs, but the others they had to do it by train. So that's it. Yeah, thank you. Questions? Anybody got a question?
So Mary, firstly, thank you. That was an amazing presentation. And
Thank you.
Tell your family then to stop bugging me.
Got that? I got one of my kids back there.
Terrific, the content, the presentation, fabulous. My question is about the workers. So I noticed that amongst the workers, there were several black Americans or black workers. I was wondering if you can speak to that, and who were the workers?
The workers were anybody who wanted work. They picked them up. They picked them up from in bars sometimes, and they, you know, even if they were drunk, they'd get them, take them, sober them up, and have them work. They were people who were willing to leave their families for the entire winter, because there was no way to get back and forth. To go, I mean, they had to work 6 of the 7 days, and so they took whoever wanted to come to work. And they took a lot of people who didn't speak English. There were a lot of, my grandfather remembered a lot of Finns. Yeah, a lot of people who couldn't, and French-speaking people. And then when they ate at meals, and nobody ever knows really why they said you can't talk during the meal, during the meals, but this was true in all the logging camps. Maybe because some of them didn't speak the same languages, or maybe they'd get into fights, or maybe it would just slow down the process of the cook and the cookies cleaning up, or they had to get back to work so fast. We don't know, but they didn't talk, but they hired whoever wanted to come.
From where?
From any place they could find them. And these workers in Berlin, New Hampshire, and Groveton, north New Hampshire, they hired a lot of them from there. And of course, in the sawmill, they hired them from South Paris, mostly, or around South Paris. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how many sleds you produced over what period of time? I mean, I had one. I
You
don't know about my skis. But I'm interested in what was,
I don't know what the total was, except that at one time they were the largest producer of sleds in the world. And they were the first ones to do skis. My skis were hickory, and I'm surprised that they're like this tall. I skied on things like this. I go, what? Really?
any idea about the annual production of, they shipped all over the place?
Oh, they shipped all over the world. But, and Grandpa used to go to places, New York or Philadelphia, or places where there were toy fairs every winter and sell a lot there. And they did a lot by that. Of course, nobody had any internet or anything like that to do any promoting. But he did go to a lot of toy fairs and things like that to sell stuff. And they were really a very large company. But I don't have numbers for the totals. Yeah.
Mary, what do you see as the major threats to the Maine logging industry at this time?
At this time, climate change. I talked a lot with the foresters at the Maine Forest Service, climate change, but this man whom I quoted about unprecedented change, he's very hopeful. He says, if the people will do what we need to do, and he elaborated some, but the forest is resilient. He said it's been around for thousands of years, it's going to stay here. If we take care of it, we'll be all right. And so I kind of liked his attitude, but climate change is not helping. And we will the forest will look different because some of the southern trees are moving north. And so ours may go who knows where, but we may have the deciduous trees may be different trees than they are now. And when I say maybe different, we're not talking like next year. We're talking decades. It'll take a while. But it'll change. The forest will change. Yeah.
Well, kind of a perspective on that is that the last ice age supposedly ended about 10,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a little research on the ice age, and I wasn't quite sure how long it lasted, but the ice age lasted 2.25
Million years, yeah,
and
yeah.
moving forward and back. So if you look at that area 10,000 years ago, there wasn't a tree.
I know, I know,
Wasn't a tree anywhere.
I know. It was all ice, yeah.
And could you talk about the bedding in some of the camping and, I mean, in the
Oh.
houses and the one blanket that they all shared?
Oh, yes. Oh, I could read you something out of that. That's in the book. Oh, yes. And if they wanted to turn over, the guy would yell flop and they'd all have to turn at once. Oh, and of course they were lice infested, you know. They were like blankets and they stuffed straw in them and, oh, not your comfortable sleeping quarters. But yeah, they were so tightly in there, but that was a way to keep warm. Children's author. I had him read it. I wanted to know how it sounded to him. And so Chris said to me, he said, oh, you know, this is cool. And I said, well, now you know where your sled came from the woods up in New Hampshire. Because he had a Paris sled. But if you had one of those wagons like that, it probably came from the Paris company. Yeah. Well, those pictures were in one of the catalogs that I took them out of that. Yeah.
I'm wondering if, now you read so much about infestations of different kinds of insects that are harming the
Mhm.
birds and certain kinds of.
The spruce budworm is making a comeback right now. They're struggling with it right now.
And I didn't know if you can remember talking about historically through the years, you know, did they have as many issues with that kind of pest 100 years ago?
They've always had pests. Some years they get worse than others. And like I say, this year they're starting another spruce budworm round kind of thing. But the thing is, when the trees get different, when we get different kinds of trees in here, they're going to be different insects and different diseases and everything will be different. But the forestry students will just have to learn how to deal with what's coming. But I was really encouraged by this forestry district manager thinking that, you know, if the forest is resilient, it will, you know, if we take care of it, we're going to be all right. But it'll be different. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Were all of the workers paid by the season, or were some on a piecework basis, or?
They were paid in a very funny way. They weren't paid until the end of the season. Because if they were, they might leave. So they got credit, and they kept credit, how many hours you worked and all this kind of thing. And they had a company store, so if you needed new boots or new jacket or new something, they take that off of what you'd earned. So they kept careful records, but you didn't see any money until it was over. Because you might leave, and they couldn't afford to have you leave. Crazy, but it worked. Any more crazy questions?
How many of the workers came back year after year? Was there an issue with that every year because it was so difficult and dangerous?
They came back, many of them did come back because they knew how to do it. And I guess their families got used to living alone without them all winter long or something. I would not think I would like that, but they knew how to do it, and it's very easy to get hurt doing lumbering. And if you know how to do it, it's better. But even then, people do get hurt. So, anybody else?
How many horsepower was that Lombard?
The Lombard was about 10. Yeah, at first, yeah, the first ones. But then they got bigger, but see, Grandpa had one of the early ones. I really think he had the 9th one, but I don't know.
I think those logs look heavy.
The logs looked that's why they needed icy roads. They had to have icy roads, but then sometimes when they put hay on the hills, well, sometimes these little 4-footed things with antlers would come out and eat the hay. So they didn't really like the deer very much because the deer would eat the hay and then they go shoosing down the hill. Yeah.
Then they had deer for dinner.
Right, right. I suppose they could have had venison, yeah.
Can you talk about the narrow gauge railroads that were built into the mountains to haul out lumber in parts of Maine?
They were not involved in the Paris Company's thing, but they did use they did have narrow gauge railroads, and they also had when they had a problem with fires, they made all the railroads and all the sawmills put spark arresters on their chimneys because they were causing forest fires. But there were narrow gauge railroads in the hills, and I would think that would be easier than but if you had a Lombard, that was your way of getting it out. And that's what my grandfather did. And then they took it to the regular railroad to go down to South Paris. So it was crazy. Yeah. Exporting? I don't know how much was exported. Not much from my family's company because they used it. Lumber, oh yeah, a lot of lumber went. But what this lumbering did was to take wood down to the South Paris to be made into products. Yeah. But yes, oh yeah, lumber was, in fact, the very earliest mast pines, of course, started all that going across the ocean. And even with the mast trade, of course, a lot of people got killed cutting the trees, and then they'd load up these boats, and not every ship made it back to England. So there's probably still lumber down there under the ocean floor. I don't know, because but the king wanted so we exported a lot of pine trees from the very beginning. Yeah, yeah.
On that subject, the masks going back, were they put up on the deck, or were they tied to the side? Because they were so long.
They built special ships, and they had a big hole in the stern, and they put them in the hole, and they were all down in the lowest part, so it make balance would be better. But still, they could still lose a whole thing. But they built ships that were long enough. They were really desperate the Royal Navy was very important to Britain because they had, colonies all over the place. So they needed masts, and they were getting them from the Baltic, but occasionally there'd be some political turmoil there, and they couldn't get them. And they owned the colonies, so why not get them from the colonies? They see these great big trees, so they built special ships, long ships, put them in. Yeah, yeah.
I have a really unusual question. My husband is from that area, Coas County, in the Stark area, which I think is Crystal area. During World War II, there was a prisoner of war camp there, German prisoner of war.
Right.
Were any of those people ever involved in the logging process, or was it just
They were not able to be used. Yeah, right. And of course, this book right here is World War I story, but the World War II, they were not able to be, they weren't allowed to use them. But yes, you're right, it was quite close. Yeah. Yeah, Crystal, there's a road up in Crystal called the Paris Road, if you look at your maps. Yeah, well, that's why, because that was the road into the camp. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? I don't know if I can answer these things. Yeah.
Did your grandfather own the land where the camp was?
No. They bought what they called stumpage from IP. IP owned the land, and they they pick strange words for everything, but stumpage I suppose means you can cut and leave a stump. I don't know, But they bought stumpage so that IP said, you can have the hardwood, we want the softwood for pulp. And so that's why, that's one of the advantages of having the log hauler, because horses couldn't go up grades, and the log hauler could, so they could move it from the watershed over to the Connecticut River watershed, so they could get their pulpwood down in Connecticut, and Grandpa could take the hardwood to the train station at Crystal and go down to South Paris. Yeah. Anybody else? You know everything now, right?
Was all of the softwood cut into short pulp logs?
Yeah.
They didn't cut any longer?
No. Well, they originally, it would have been cut long and then cut into 4-foot logs from once they got it down. Yeah. I don't know why 4 feet, but that's what it was. It still is. They use 4-foot logs.
My uncle had a mill in Cumberland. I was just looking at one of his deeds the other day, and it was just like, he could cut the wood for 5 years, anything and everything off the lot for 5 years. Is that a common practice?
Yeah. They say, well, and that's this Grandpa's orders from his older brothers and were running the company. You have to get enough to log for, they wanted it for 10 years, but they'd say where you can log for that amount of time. Yeah, that was common. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Any plans on a book on the Paris company itself and the manufacturing of all the products?
You don't want my son to hear that. He's back there cutting my neck. We have a lot of material about the Paris company. I have so many ideas of books to write that I can't even explain, and I wouldn't dare to mention them in front of my son anyway. So forget it. No, that was different. Yeah, that was different. And they didn't make snowshoes. That was Melly Dunham, but it was also in the Norway South Paris area. But a lot of people ask about the snowshoes, but they didn't do that either. But they did do skis, and apparently they did wagons. Well, thank you. Oh, nice.
And Mary's got her books for sale up here.
Yes, thank you. I had fun.
Do you have the first Saturday in May next year open? Because I want to have you do Maine Mayflower Society. I think this
Oh, nice, yeah. I think so. I don't have my calendar.
I don't